Okay. All right. So welcome to the December 14th meeting for the DEI Board Committee. We're going to have an opportunity to update everybody on the task force meeting. So last Wednesday, December 9th, the community task force, the district task force had an opportunity to meet up again. I want to go over some of the learning objectives and kind of how the agenda of the evening proceeded. So the learning objectives for last meeting, one, to understand the roadmap of the diversity, equity, and inclusion task force. So we've wrapped up the first phase. First phase was setting a foundation for the task force. We will be moving into phase two, which is developing goals and action steps. In March, our plan is to be into phase three. Again, teams and stakeholder feedback at that point. And then the fourth phase are the outcomes that will be submitted to administration and the school board at our June meeting. The second learning objective of last meeting was to recognize the purpose of the DEI task force. And then the third was to understand, for everyone in the committee to understand their role in the DEI task force. So we began the evening by talking about the purpose of the task force. So why it was formed. We talked about some of the issues that our community has experienced, the calls that we received from students and other members of our community looking for action here. We talked about how this DEI task force is aligned with the district's strategic plan. And then we talked a bit about the purpose. And then prior to the meeting on Wednesday, the task force leadership had the opportunity to develop a purpose. And we shared that with the task force on last Wednesday. And I'm going to share that with all of you as well. So the purpose of the DEI task force is to define equity in the Mount Lebanon School District, to identify achievement and opportunity gaps, to set goals, and to establish recommendations to achieve those goals. So taking a step back, let's think about the elements that are involved in this purpose statement that was developed. One, define equity and what it means for our school district. Two, to dive in and really identify some of the achievement and opportunity gaps that we do see in our community, in our school district. To set goals, right? Where do we want to be? And then that final step is how do we achieve those goals, right? So setting out those recommendations for achieving those particular goals. We reviewed some of the community agreements that were developed. We did this with Dr. Bennett. As many of you know, she is our facilitator from Pennsylvania School Board Association. She's been working with the leadership team. And then we started the conversation about everyone's role in this task force, right? So we talked about the board's role on the task force. We talked about the administration's role in the task force. And then in our breakout groups, we began a conversation about what everyone brought to the conversation, right? So our strengths, as well as an acknowledgement of the weaknesses that we bring to conversations around equity. We finished in our breakout groups talking about some of the data that we would like to see. Now this led to a lot of conversation for the data that exists for us, right? That we have on hand for analysis, as well as what are we missing, right? So that being a conversation about a broader equity analysis for the community. Next steps, we always have a meeting survey at the end. So all of our task force members have an opportunity to complete a survey where they provide us with some feedback on their thoughts on how this task force is developing. And then we do have a DEI task force email that I meant to write down and put in front of me, but of course I did not do that. So is it just DEI at, yes? Okay, all right. So it's DEI at NTLS?
DE.net.
.net. All right, so there we go. Dr. Irvin, did I miss anything? It was kind of a pretty broad overview of how the evening went.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things. We did do breakout groups. We had 4 breakout groups that were family and community members, and then we had 1 for students, and we had 1 for staff. You mentioned our survey, Dr. Hackett, and I wanted to let you know that we had about 14 people completed already, and usually I send the task force committee meetings some reminders and things before our next meeting, so I'll make sure that I do that as well so that we can take that feedback as we prep for the January 6th meeting, which is our next meeting.
Excellent. And as I've said many times, the purpose of the board committee is also to be a liaison to the broader community. So part of the quick overview is I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for our members of the community who would like to touch base with us. They have an opportunity to do so. So I would like to offer that now. Mr. Stengel, is there anybody who has put a hand up to talk with us?
There is not.
Okay. Anybody else on the leadership team have any thoughts or additions?
I think just Dr. Urban mentioned the next task force meeting is in January. It's in starting phase 2, so the goal setting phase of the work. We're going to do a deep dive into some of the district's data around equity, which was part of the reason that the task force in their breakout rooms started brainstorming in terms of what sort of data they would be interested in seeing around equity in the district. And I believe this committee will then meet in January before the regular January board meeting to share out from that task force session.
Great. Yeah, I believe we actually meet later in the week as well, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Stengel, I think we do have a hand up now. Hi, Dr. Cohen. Could you state your name and your address for the record?
Sure. It's Mark Cohen, 58 Glen Ridge Lane, Mount Lebanon. I'm the parent of a 6-year-old at Jefferson Elementary and a 11-year-old at Jefferson Middle. I just want to call and offer up appreciation to see and hear about the ways that the DEI task force is moving forward. It's certainly appreciated. I know it's no small task given how much is on everyone's plate. And I also want to, as someone who has done a fair amount of work in these areas, also urge the committee, the district and the school board to consider what it would mean to have a DEI director approved before, make sure that that was in place before the next budget is approved, because I think that would really complement the work that's happening in really powerful ways and really get at just who's being impacted the most by the pandemic, as well as substantive ways of moving forward post-pandemic, having identified who needs what supports and where. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your thoughts. I know that I and the other committee members really appreciate your thoughts and your input. All right. Well, I was thinking that maybe there'd be a few more questions coming in from the community, but it doesn't look like anybody else has a question. So that's Mr. Stengel. I think we do have a couple hands up now.
Good evening. My name is Gina Capela, and I'm at 612 Vermont Avenue. And I have 2 children at Foster Elementary School. And I had not intended to speak tonight until I heard Dr. Cohen speak. And I think what he is suggesting is critical to moving the DEI task force work forward in a meaningful way for the district. It's a large undertaking, and to infuse and incorporate DEI work into a district the size of Mount Lebanon, and without a person who is devoted to that work and can support leadership, teachers, and so forth, it's hard to keep that at the forefront in the center of the discussions, whether it's looking at how we can best move forward during the pandemic equitably for all students and families, or if it's just a normal year and how we can make sure we're addressing equity at every stage of the education of our children. So I just wanted to support and sort of second what Dr. Cohen had added or had suggested. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Mr. Sutter?
Hello. Anyway, I am John Sutter at 326 McCulley Street. And I have 2 children in the district schools, a son in Jefferson Middle and a daughter at Lincoln. And, you know, I very much am pleased that the district is moving forward with the DEI task force. I really think that this is an opportunity to do some broad healing and broad education in an area that is really not historically been addressed. And so I'm very excited. I'm coming a little bit late into the DEI process, and I was wondering if it's possible, one, for somebody to do a little bit of a recap somewhere in the meeting at some point, so that people who are drifting into the meeting can have a little bit better context of where in the process things are moving. I think that just sort of the nature of people's schedules and their participation, that a little bit of a recap for those of us who can't be here for the entire meeting or you know, have to jump in and out, maybe can have a little bit of context if they start at the beginning. The other thing is that I think that this idea of a DEI director is actually a very interesting idea. And I was wondering if you all could comment on that. That's very interesting. That's my comment. Thank you.
Dr. Steinhauer, do you want to comment on that? Or
Sure. Regarding, I think Dr. Hackett, you did do an overview of the process and the steps that you were taking, the DEI task force was taking, and I thought that was clearly laid out. And maybe we can have Dr. Irvin memorialize that someplace and write it down if it's not already posted someplace. But I thought that Dr. Hackett, you did a nice job kind of laying where we are in the landscape. So maybe Mr. Sutter missed that very beginning of it. Regarding a DEI director, that's something certainly that the board will consider or can consider as we approach budget season. As you know, we'll be working on a preliminary budget in January, and then the board will be digging into it to have a budget concluded by May. So that certainly is something for the board. They can consider.
okay.
I think were those the 2 comments, I think?
I believe so. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, maybe we can have further conversation.
Mr. Hackett, or Dr. Hackett, I'm sorry, I will remind you as well. We do put information. We have a DEI website. I will admit I've been lax in getting that updated, but we can certainly make sure that the agendas are on that website as well. That's what we did put it on there for. But Mr. Sutter's comments reminded me that I need to get those things posted. So we'll take care of that in the coming days.
Okay. Excellent. All right, we will meet again in the first part of January, the DEI task force. I believe it is scheduled for January 6th, and the leadership team will meet once, if not twice, before that time. And of course, we will the board DEI committee will follow up with the community in January after the task force meets. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved.
All right, second. All right, everybody. The school board is about to meet at 7:30, so I will see all of you there.